Hi everyone. I have a little sketch here that I've drawn out, and this is what I'm going to be painting today. It's a floral arrangement, and basically just very loosely, we're going to loosely paint the background and then paint the shapes also in the center. But what I want to start off with is telling you what colors I'm using, and I'm trying out the BlockX paints. This is called a primary blue, but it's like a phthalo blue green shade. Quin Rose, this one is from M. Graham, and then Daniel Smith and Azo Yellow. So I'm not sure exactly how this color combination is going to look like, but I always like to try a yellow, red, and a blue and see what happens. So before I start, I'm going to, I've laid out the colors here in my little palette, but before I start, what I always do is I test out my colors. So I'm going to take some of that yellow to see what it looks like. It's a pretty nice yellow, and I'm going to try that. But it's nice. Being nice is not a good reason to actually use it. So what would be my reasoning behind using it would be, how does it mix with the colors that I want to use? So in my case, I've got some Quin Rose here, and I'm taking a look at what this color does with that yellow. And it's pretty. Does it move? The paints move a little bit into the yellow, and they move nicely. So let's try that. And then the next one is a phthalo blue, which is called primary blue in this case. I'm not going to mix that with this one just yet. I want to see what the blue looks like on its own. So you can see it's a very, very bright blue, very intense. I know that if I mix a little bit of red with it, I can really neutralize it and make it violet, a nice soft violet. So that probably would work for the background if I used this blue and a little bit of violet, and of course the blue with the yellow. What does that look like? Try not to contaminate my little wells too much, because I will be mixing colors on my palette. Now here's a very bright blue applied next to the yellow, and it's quite lovely. It turns into a turquoise. So, all right, let's get started. What I'm going to do is focus on the flowers to be more on the orangey, yellow, reddish colors. So these colors here are going to go into the middle. And I'm going to take that purple out here for now, make sure that it's not contaminated. And I'll spread that on the flowers. I'll also use some of the blue to paint the background. And I want to do this really quickly. I want to do this in some quick strokes. Don't want to paint each petal individually just yet. We can go back to that afterwards. We can start painting them a little bit more delicately after it dries. But for now, I just want to ensure that I have a really nice mixing of colors on paper, and I'm going to let the colors mix together on the paper. All right, so let's get started. So the first colors that I'm going to use is the yellow. Just going to mix that up here on the side, because this is pure pigment here. And I want to make sure that my brush is really nicely saturated with paint. I don't want to be picking pure pigment to apply on my paper, because if I do that, I will have areas of really dark paint that's not moving, not going anywhere, against areas that are very fluid. So I've mixed a little puddle on the side. I'll do the same with the pinks. And I'm just going to be varying the amount of pigment that I put on my flowers, because I want to make sure that I have a variety of colors for the flowers. They're not just a plain color. There's going to be colors mingling together. And I'm not going to worry about the background too much just yet. In fact, I'm going to put this at a bit of an angle, and I'm going to start at the top. One other thing that I've decided I'd like to do is keep one flower white so that I can go back into it later and do something else to it. All right, make it pop out a little bit more. So this is going to be one of those washes that basically is just a soft wash going right across. I'm using yellow because later if I use my blue on top of that, I will definitely be getting some beautiful colors for the foliage and some nice greens. Now I'm throwing in some little bit of color here to make it interesting. And I'm working my way down. This color is very, very intense. It's fine because I'm also leaving some whites here. Where I see there's a bit of flower, I'm putting little dabs of color there. So I have a choice here. I could make this one white as well and paint it individually, or I could paint right over it. Let's paint over it. Now, I'm probably just going to go right in here. And one thing that I could do though is preserve that little spot. And so what I just did is removed some of the pigment that I had just put on there because I do want to preserve that. And as I'm going down, I can go ahead and leave a few little white areas. And I'm just now looking at this flower, but also painting the background. I'm not thinking about shadows and all that. I'm really just mingling colors together on the paper. I'll add some water if I want to dilute this and reduce the intensity of that brightness. And that was okay up here. It was still wet. So let's do that. We'll bring this down now to a gradual lighter color. I'm adding a little bit of a touch of color here just to make it more interesting. It's always nice to blend your colors on the paper. And here I might actually just loosen that up as well. If I want to just add a little bit more pinks in here. For the floral, once again, I was touching up the florals with a little bit of red color to it. And then that'll be it. So once this is applied, we're going to let that dry. And you'll see that I wasn't super careful about some of those little areas that are still white. But if it bothers me, I can take my brush right now while it's still wet, if it's still wet, and I can adjust that. But I'm noticing this one's not wet anymore. There's not too much none of it is really that wet anymore. So I just leave it because it will be so much easier afterwards to refine the lines on this little painting. All right, so I'm going to let this dry for a good half hour. So come back later. Okay, so this is nice and dry. What I'm going to do next is take my square brush and just go around in the background to fill in some of that space. I'm taking a little bit of blue. I could water that down even more to get it softer. And then here, all I want to do is add color around the shapes. And when we do that, we actually create an effect of the object popping and giving us a little bit more information about it. So what we see now is that the petals are being defined by the application of the blue. And again, this is probably not very dark, but you can see that it doesn't take much. I could even go lighter at this point. And I can go around all my shapes, or I can just do some of them. I can point out some of the ones that I want to highlight more, and I can leave some of them without any color. So I often like to take my backgrounds down to the bottom at an angle. So if I did something like this, and I have a square brush, but I still like to use my round brush for the little corners, like in this case here, because I need to fill that in to show off the white flower. Then I can better manipulate these small areas to go around the shapes. The square brush for me works really nicely in the larger spaces and then to contour an edge like this. But once I get into those little corners, I like to switch to my point because it allows me to make a finer line into that little area, like kind of squeezing in some color in here. And I'll just continue to do this all the way down. For now, I will just leave this part loose. And notice that where I'm actually adding this color, which is very, very light, I see the colors underneath. I'm seeing through the paint that I'm applying. And so that means that I still have the colors from the initial first wash. They're still shining through. And so they allow me to have a variety of colors in the background. And I'm going to dry my brush here just to lift off a little bit. And as I get down here, I probably just want to loosen this up, put more water, and this way, when I start applying my color around this shape, it will just get mixed with the water that I've just applied, and we have a nice loose effect. Nice and soft. So pure water on my brush right now. Very small amount of blue pigment. But this is a transparent color. This blue is a phthalo blue green shade. In this case, I used BlockX version of it. It's called Primary Blue. And it is a transparent color. And if it wasn't transparent, I would have to dilute it even more to make sure that I wasn't getting any of the thickness showing through. All right, so I'll just continue this. Put a little bit more on my palette. You can see I'm not using a lot of paint. And I'm still working my way through to the other side. And now, if I continue along the path that I said I would, I'm probably just going to want to stop somewhere. We'll see where, just whatever feels right. Now I'm just softening this up, putting water here as well. And at this point, I have water all the way down here. So it means I have a little bit of time to go into some of those little crevices. There's a little petal shape here, but I'm just going to paint over that. I can identify that later. Punch it up a bit more. And now, if I continue along that line of colors flowing down, I probably want to stop around here. Now, up here, I left a couple of straight marks, really edgy marks, and I like that, and I'll probably do that once it's dry to a couple of other areas. But for now, I was focusing on just getting the paint down, all the way down, and highlighting the flowers that are actually the focal point, center of attention. Okay, and I'm going to let that dry. We can just loosen this up over here so that we don't have a clear distinction yet. I'll decide where I want to leave more marks like this after it's dry, because then we can use these types of shapes to do leafy shapes. And I can show an example of that here. For example, if I take, I'll use some of the red and yellow on my palette here just for fun. Okay, so here's what we could do afterwards in here. Just take your brush and cut a few little shapes. Let's grab some blue. I'm just experimenting right now to see what the colors would look like. Probably not at all what I'm going to be using here, because I won't be putting that color on these flowers. I wouldn't want to do that. But if I have some blue and some yellow, then I can certainly make some nice leafy type shapes in here. And a leaf doesn't have to be a perfect, something like this. It should really be very spontaneous. Grab some of your yellows and you can mix them on the palette, or you can mix them on the paper. Practice on the side to make little shapes, and so once you get in there, you'll be better prepared for what your brush can do. Now I have added a little bit more blue here, so what happens here is my yellow mixed with the blue here gives me a yellow green, and here I get a blue green. So there may be certain areas where I want something more like on a blue green side or a yellow green side, and we'll work that through whenever that's dry. So while I'm waiting for it to dry, I could actually paint a little bit of the colors inside the shapes. So what I usually look for, because I don't have a picture in front of me per se, this was just a sketch, I'm going to use the petals, the overlapping petals, to help me determine where the shadows will go. I just noticed there's one little spot here that I would like to add some blue to, so I'll do that right away. And that looks like a little petal in here. I'll leave it for now. Actually, I'll paint that. Gives a better definition of this shape. Okay, so one more little shape. Actually, that could be part of the petal here, so maybe I'll just leave that one. Okay. Yeah, making it up as I go along. The centers can have a little bit more color, so I'll grab a bit of orangier color, maybe even just a little bit on the pinkier side, just because I want it to be a bit darker in here. And I'm going around the shapes. So I'm saying to myself, where is it that this little shape might have some shadow? So this shape is underneath this one. And so therefore I will put shadow in underneath. This one, I feel like this one is going underneath like this, and this looks like a little overlap. So I'm going to put some color in here just for now, and I will probably want to just smooth that out a bit so that I'm not creating too much attention there. And here as well, just loosen that up. When I loosen it up, what I do is I take the water out of my brush and I just use my brush to rub it a little bit. Okay. Now, I could put some shadow right in here, because that's an overlap. Every time you have an overlap, it helps to define things. Very helpful to create the image of, or the illusion of depth or shape, form. Okay, so I'll leave that one like that for now. I'll just put a little bit of color in here. And the center is where I would have a little bit more attention. I might go back to those whites afterwards, but I'm trying to leave myself some room to make decisions. And I do want this core to be pretty intense. So I'm taking some pure red with some pure yellow, very thick, and I'm adding that to the center. Also, while it's still moving, I will take a little bit of the blue and just drop that in there. The colors are moving and they are just all blending together. But this is perfect for this kind of an area because I want it I do want it to have a little bit more attention. Now I'm going to lift all the color here. I don't want to go too far down. There. And at the top, I can do, let's take some red over here. And define that petal. Shadow, little line, just play. Little strokes, couple of lines. We'll come back to it later. This one, it doesn't have any color, so if I want this to be part of this little group, I think I would like to stick to the yellows and the reds. I could go with a violet, or I could go with a little bit of blue in here, and would probably pop out even more. But if I use my blue in here, I would have to keep it very, very light because I want these parts to be darker. So let's try the blue just for fun. So in this case, I will wet some of these areas. And the blue will be just very, very light. Blue is a nice color to depict white. Blue and a little bit of red. which is like the violet. Just a bit. Don't need a lot of color. For a white, when we're painting white, we don't want a lot of powerful colors. Let's just do that over here again, just a touch. You see, I'm not picking up a lot of color with my brush. If I did that on this page, this is what I get. It's very, very light. And I'm restricting those colors to the core. The middle part. I'm being very careful, very watchful of how much blue I'm getting on my brush. And in here, I will darken it a little bit because it's an area of dark space that shows separation. I can even go just a bit of blue in here. Let's mix that violet a bit. I don't really know exactly what's going on here, but let's just add some color to this part. Let's move this all the way into here and loosen this up. Add a bit more, the reds. Now, see, that little bit of red is already very bright. So if I don't really want it that bright, I just flood it with water and then I lift. Okay, because if I have that brightness in here, then it's taking me away from the center of the flower, which is typically where you're sending your eye. But I mean, it doesn't have to be there, obviously. So for this one, I'd say I can still use the yellow. But I don't want to use the orange like I have here. So I'll just use yellow. And after it dries a bit more, I'll add some little dots of dark. And for this one, we're just going to darken the red. And to do that, red and green does give us a neutralized color. It's the complementary color. And so I'm getting some little dots here. And I can add a couple of dots here too with that color. And if that's a few too many dots, we can lift them a little bit so they're not as intense. And that's still wet, and once that dries, I'll use that same darkness to point that out. Now, everything is still wet, and at this point, I think I'd like to just give it a little bit of time to dry. These little shapes here, I keep saying that, and then I don't stop. So, because at this point, I think I'd like to just maybe add a little bit of yellows with a bit of red, some bright colors. And I'm going to leave that one up here. Now this is attracting a lot of attention. So I might just want to neutralize that a little bit by adding another color on top. I'll make this the greens. Okay. That looks like a bud more than a leaf shape. And over here, I see that I missed one teeny little spot of blue. Lots of water in there. I'm going to have this sit there, dry, and then I'll come back and look at it afterwards. Okay, so I'm back and I'm going to work on finishing this little painting. It's dry. It has to be really good and dry before you come back to it. It's always very important with watercolor. And all I'm doing here is adding just a little bit of water to this pigment that I have here, because once again, like I said in the section just a little earlier than this, the application of the color at this point is very, very light color. And when we do that, we're actually glazing. We are not covering what's underneath. We are allowing what is underneath to shine through. But we can control where we put our color. And in my case, I've been directing it in an area that's flowing down towards the edges this way. And now what I'll try to do is just enhance or just add a bit more pigment to make it a little bit darker. And if I move the colors down to the bottom of the paper, I won't have any problems with line. So that's nice. But then I also said it would be nice to have a little bit of the color up here where we see the square brush was used and we have those hard edges, having some of that color come out in other places of the painting, and that would be more of an effect of foliage perhaps. So I'm going to take some of that blue. I'm going to take a little bit more pigment this time, and I'm going to just maybe let's try the color first. That's a lot brighter. So how that's going to change is going to be it's going to be interesting. So let's try it first with this brush. So I can just do a little corner, and although this looks like it should be just a little spot, I think I will try to make it look like a petal, but if it doesn't look right, I can just cover that all up. So this is quite thick, and it's not going to show as much transparency as the others, although this is a transparent color, and so just in terms of its nature, it will be transparent. It will dry darker, but it will still have some transparency. So let's do these little corners here before I go and attack the leaf shapes that I want to do. And that tells me how dark this paint will be. And it's a good spot to do because as we go deeper into the painting, those areas should be darker. In fact, I'll probably want them to be even darker than that. And to darken them darker than this is also to add a little bit of red to them. And that gets very purpley colorish. Is that a word? Okay. So we'll stop here for now. But you can see now how this is dark compared to this. So let me see. I'll grab, this is wet, so I don't want to touch that. In here, I could do something here, or I could do it on this side. Let's come down here. It's nice and dry in here. Haven't done anything here yet. And I'm using my square brush again, another little shape that's behind. And I'm just going to cover it in a little bit. My brush is dry, so I'm just pushing paint around when I do that. There's no pigment on my brush. I take all the water out, and then I just allow the brush to push the paint out. So in here, I'll continue. Now this has more water on it. And now I can make a shape here. Kind of like that other one. Just random shapes that kind of look like foliage, sort of. And painting around on the inside so that it looks like it's continuous. Okay. Now I can see that I need to go in here, but it's wet and I don't want to do that yet. So, and I also see that maybe once this dries, I might want to darken that even more. Can I put some in here? Sure. So I'm taking that band and I'm extending it to the top of my page. And I'm going around one of those little shapes. And I'm connecting the blue here to this because it makes it look then that it's one big shape behind here. But it doesn't have to go right up to the edge. And let's just do another one up here. I don't want to cover everything up. So what gets really tricky here is sort of like, well, where do you stop? It's so much fun to do that you just want to keep going and going and going. And then you realize afterwards that you should have stopped and you should not have done what you did. Just because it's more interesting if you have a variety of shapes and colors. That's all. And I don't want to change too much over here. Maybe I want to create a little outline here of a little petal shape. It's so light, it's just, there's hardly any pigment on there. And this being already colored, all that we're doing is we are emphasizing the colors beneath, underneath. And let's just do a bit over here. Why I'm doing some here is because it helps to bring out this shape. Because the white is the part that will attract attention. What I do with these little shapes is I'm just trying to make them different sizes, like long, square, curvy. And a little bit here. Again, this is just highlighting the white petals. Not too much because I'm still trying to go down this path. But just here in these little crooks, little corners that help to define the shape. Now this one here is interesting. I didn't really finish that. I have some white on the outside. So I'll just take some of the pinks and make that look like it's part of the another petal underneath. Okay. And here as well, it feels like there's something missing here. Such light touch and such a small amount of color. It makes you wonder why you even have to buy all those tubes of paint that we have. What you have in tubes is probably enough to last you a lifetime if you're like me. All right. And I'm just going to add a few little defining areas. These are not dark areas, but just again, just to try to go around shapes. Put a little bit of line. You can soften the lines as they go up. And what I had said earlier for this one was that I would use some of that brown. I don't know if I still have my palette that I used for that. I tend to switch palettes around because I do different things at the same time. But let's just mix up some more gray or black here. Blue and red, violet, and a bit of yellow. Well, that's way more blue than what I need. A little more violet. There we go. This is even good. I could use a little more yellow, but to neutralize it a bit more, but it's probably good. Touch of red. Very dark. Nice and dark. Let's just do a couple more in here. A couple here, and then in here. I'm holding my brush up and down, and I'm just dabbing. Right. And I can soften some of these. Would it make sense to put a little bit more color in there? Maybe. Just a little bit of red. That's the Quin Rose. So if I do any more than that, then it's not going to work. So there we go. Just highlight this little edge down here. And I'd say that's it for that. Now, in here, there's like a little circle in the middle. There's two things I can do with that. I can make this darker, pinker, which is what I just did. And I can also emphasize this little ball shape, maybe with more yellow. It just gives it a little bit of interest. I made those up. They weren't really there in the picture, but they're just fun to. And so in fact, it wasn't a picture, it was just a sketch. So it's just part of an imaginative mixing of colors. The bottom underneath, maybe there's a shadow here. Obviously, if it goes over top of, then yeah, there's a little shadow here. And this one too. Bit of a shadow up here, so make that a bit darker. But you can see that what I'm using to go darker is not a black or a dark blue. I'm using the colors that are in the petal to darken. And the best way to do that is just to take some of your red and yellow, mix that up. I'm adding just a little bit of the blue here to make it a browny color, more like a beige tone, once again. And here we can maybe reinforce some of those little areas. Even that, to me, is probably just a little bit dark, but it will dry a lot lighter. And if we don't have enough form, then it's hard for us to read what it is that this painting is all about. I would almost prefer that this little area here is darker, So I will go ahead and do that. I've picked a little bit of my mixed blue here. And I'm just going around those three shapes, actually. I like that shape. So I'm just going to lose it. There we go. Little touches. Now, every time I add a bit more pigment, I get darker. You can see that, right? So it's easy now to add the contrast. Once all your main colors are on here, they're all down, you can easily start changing some of these colors. And remember, I didn't really put any yellow on here, although there seems to be yellow because I touched my yellow. I just really want to get some blue in here. A little bit more blue in here. Just in those little areas that go around shapes. All right. Anyways, I think you probably get the idea of how we're going to be building a painting in this way. And I think you really have to just give it a try and play with it. This is really negative painting, and watercolor is all about negative painting. So if you can play with going around your shapes, just even if it doesn't work out the first time or the second or the third, it doesn't matter, but keeping that concept in mind, you will find that there's a lot of things that become easier to do in watercolor. All right. So thanks for watching. See you next time.